They're mad because they fumbled something that doesn't come around twice in a lifetime. You see, people walk through this world assuming that greatness will always be available. They believe loyalty is replaceable. They treat integrity like it's optional. And when someone like you walks into their life, someone solid, someone who loves deeply, someone who shows up with truth in a world full of lies, they don't know what to do with it because it terrifies them. You weren't just a good person, you were a rare soul, a force of light in a place they had long surrendered to darkness. And in their arrogance, they thought they could play games with that. They believed you'd stay no matter how many times they lied, how many times they disrespected your boundaries, how many times they pushed you to see how far you'd bend, but you didn't break. You walked away. And now they're furious, not just at you, but at themselves. They're not mad because you failed them. They're mad because they failed themselves. They're mad because you were the real deal and they treated you like a placeholder. They were so used to manipulating, deceiving, controlling, that when someone finally came along who wasn't playing a role in their drama, but rather offering something pure, they couldn't handle it. Their ego told them they had time. Their pride told them they could always win you back. But now the silence screams louder than any words they ever heard from you, and that silence is driving them insane. Do you know why this is so painful for them now? Because reality has finally caught up. Because their little performance is over. The mask fell off and nobody clapped. You were the one person who saw their brokenness and didn't run. You saw their wounds, their fears, their dysfunction, and still you stayed for a time. But they took that presence as weakness. They mistook your patience for passivity. And now they sit with the consequences. And make no mistake, the weight of that regret is heavy. It haunts them in quiet moments. It bleeds through their laughter. It sits in their chest when the world goes still and the distractions fall silent. That's when your absence screams. That's when the truth claws its way into their consciousness. They fumbled something divine. They fumbled someone who actually gave a damn. They replay the moments in their mind, what they said, how they acted, what they could have done differently, but it's too late. You're not just gone physically, you're gone energetically. You've evolved, you've grown. You've finally realized that being rare means not everyone deserves access to you. And that realization has built you into something even stronger. They see that now, and they hate it. They hate that you're not chasing. They hate that you're not breaking down, waiting for them to come back. They hate that you're glowing without them, because deep down they know they were the problem, and now they're stuck with themselves. That's the most powerful form of justice life can offer, letting someone sit with the full realization of what they destroyed. And it hurts even more because they know this kind of connection doesn't just appear again. People can spend decades searching for the kind of loyalty, depth, and emotional honesty you brought to the table. It's not something that can be replicated or replaced. It's not a deal you make twice. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and they blew it. Now, don't let their anger shake you. Don't let their bitterness affect your peace. You're not responsible for the weight they now carry. That's theirs. They built it. They must bear it. What matters is that you remember who you are. You remember what you offered. You remember that you gave your best, and that's something to be proud of, not ashamed. The fact that they're mad, the fact that it bothers them this much is proof of your impact. You walked away with your dignity intact, and now you walk forward with clarity, with strength, with a renewed sense of self-respect. You are not bitter, you are wiser, you are not broken, you are reborn. And while they sit in the ruins of their own making, you are building something far greater, something that will never again be squandered. Let their madness echo as a warning. Let it remind the world that not everyone is replaceable and not every loss is survivable. You were the once-in-a-lifetime deal, and they'll carry that realization like a shadow they can never escape. They didn't know what they had when they had it. That's the truth most people realize too late. They saw your loyalty, your patience, your unwavering commitment, and they didn't value it. They exploited it. They thought your kindness was a tactic, not a truth. They believed your silence was weakness, not strength. And most dangerously, they assumed that you needed them more than they needed you. That was their fatal error. See, when someone is consistently loyal in a world full of flakiness and selfishness, that kind of integrity can be uncomfortable to those who thrive in chaos. It confronts them. It exposes their instability, their superficiality, their inability to give what they so freely take. And instead of rising to meet your standard, they sought to drag you down to theirs. They played games, not because they were clever, but because they were afraid. Afraid of being known, afraid of being loved genuinely, afraid of someone seeing the truth they try so hard to bury. So what did they do? They tested you. They pushed you. They created conflict just to see if you'd leave. They weaponized your loyalty against you, because when you kept showing up, when you kept choosing understanding over judgment, forgiveness over revenge, they misinterpreted that as passivity. They believed they had power over you. They thought they were in control. But what they didn't realize was this: your loyalty was a choice, not a weakness. You stayed because you cared, not because you couldn't leave. That was the difference they never grasped until it was far too late. They lived in a fantasy where loyalty was a flaw, where love was a currency they could manipulate, and now they're awake to the brutal truth that they fumbled the one person who stood in their corner without conditions. You didn't demand perfection. You asked for honesty. You didn't expect the world. You asked for respect, but they couldn't even offer that because they were too wrapped up in themselves to recognize what stood right in front of them. There's a tragedy in that, but there's also justice. Because the truth is, when someone betrays a loyal person, they don't just lose a relationship, they lose a mirror. You reflected back to them the parts they refused to work on. Your love was uncomfortable because it was real, and real love demands growth. Real loyalty demands accountability, and they weren't ready for either, so they chose the easier route: denial, games, manipulation, distance, but they never expected you to walk away for good. And when you did, that's when it hit them. That's when the mask slipped and they realized the game was over, that the person they thought they could break had boundaries after all, that you had limits, not because you didn't love them, but because you finally loved yourself more. That's what destroys them now. Not just that you're gone, but that you left without bitterness, that you didn't scream, didn't chase, didn't beg, you simply walked away. And that silence echoes in their soul louder than any argument ever could. Now they're left with the memory of a loyalty they'll never know again. They meet new people, but it's not the same. They search for you in others, but no one else brings that same calm, that same truth, that same fierce loyalty wrapped in quiet strength. And every day, that realization digs deeper into their pride. Because when they had you, they thought you were ordinary. Only in your absence did they learn you were rare. So yes, they're mad, but not at you. They're mad because they broke something that was unbreakable, and now they have to live with the consequences. They're mad because you were everything they claimed they wanted, and they couldn't handle it. They're mad because they threw away a blessing dressed in simplicity, and now all they have left are distractions that can't touch their soul the way you did. You were not weak. You were powerful in ways they never understood until it was too late. Your loyalty wasn't a flaw. It was a standard. And now they realize that not everyone deserves access to it. Not everyone can meet it. They had a chance to rise. Instead, they chose to diminish you, to test you, to manipulate you. And now they're left behind. Let that be a lesson. Not everyone who loses you will recognize their loss immediately, but eventually the truth will always find them. And when it does, it won't be gentle, it won't be sweet, it will come like a storm in the quiet night, reminding them of the love they lost, the loyalty they betrayed, and the once-in-a-lifetime soul they'll never get back. They carry a rage now, but it's not aimed at you, it's turned inward. Because deep down, in those private moments when the noise fades and the distractions wear off, they know exactly what they did. They know they had something rare and they destroyed it. And that kind of self-betrayal, the awareness that you had the chance to choose better and didn't, is unbearable. That's the real source of their anger. It's not your silence, your growth, or your absence that's torturing them. It's the weight of what they did to themselves, You were never the villain in this story. In fact, you were the only one who tried to love them past their pain. You saw the brokenness, the patterns, the dysfunction, and still you stayed for a while, hoping they'd rise above it. You gave them a chance to grow, to be honest, to heal, but they didn't take it. They took you for granted because they thought they had time. They thought someone like you would always be there, waiting, forgiving, coming back. And that assumption that they could keep betraying your trust without consequences is what haunts them now. They are living with the brutal knowledge that they weren't just careless with you, they were destructive. That every time they lied, manipulated, or pushed you away, they weren't hurting someone else. They were sabotaging their own chance at something real. It's easy to blame others, to point fingers and make excuses. But when the dust settles, there's only the mirror, and the truth reflected back is one they can't escape. They lost someone who actually cared, and they lost them by their own hand. This is why they're mad. This is why their anger burns so hot, because they can't outrun the fact that their downfall was self-inflicted. There's no one else to blame. You gave your best, and they mishandled it. You were loyal, and they were reckless. You were transparent and they wore masks. And now they have to live with the irreversible consequences of their choices. They might lash out, they might try to rewrite the story, paint you as the problem, convince themselves that you were too sensitive or too demanding, but those are just defense mechanisms, desperate attempts to protect their ego from the truth that's eating them alive. Because the truth is clear. They pushed away someone who was trying to help them heal, and now that person is gone. Not because they stopped caring, but because they finally cared about themselves enough to leave. And that stings in a way nothing else can, because while they were playing games, you were building a future. While they were avoiding accountability, you were growing. And while they remained stuck in patterns of denial and sabotage, you chose clarity and strength. They see that now. They see your peace, your transformation, your glow, and it's a painful contrast to the chaos they're still stuck in. They thought they were winning when they had power over your emotions, when they could make you question your worth, when they could manipulate your loyalty. But now the power dynamic has shifted. Now, your silence is louder than their justifications. Now, your absence is a constant reminder of what they destroyed. And that kind of loss, that kind of regret, it never truly goes away. It lingers. It whispers to them at night. It follows them into every new connection they try to build because none of it compares to what they once had and squandered. The human mind can only suppress guilt for so long. Eventually, it leaks through. It shows up in their anxiety, in their restless sleep, in their inability to feel at peace. That's what they're experiencing now, not a temporary mood, but a deep and persistent unrest. They're not just angry, they're suffering. They're weighed down by the emotional debt they created, and every day they fail to atone for it, the burden grows heavier. You see, there's a particular kind of torment that comes from recognizing you were the architect of your own downfall. It's not like being rejected by someone else. It's the realization that you betrayed yourself, that you walked away from something you needed, that you broke something you were never going to find again. And the worst part, there's no way to go back. There's no reset button. Once a person sees you walk away and never return, that image imprints on their mind forever. You become the one that got away, not because of fate, but because of their failure. And so they sit in their rage, but it's hollow. It's not fueled by righteousness. It's fueled by regret. It's the scream of a person who realizes they traded gold for dust. And the tragedy is they could have had everything they now pretend doesn't matter. They could have grown with you. They could have healed with you. But instead, they chose destruction. And now they're left with memories that can't be undone. This is the fire they live with now, the fire of their own choices. And while they burn with anger and shame, you rise. You walk forward lighter, freer, wiser, because you gave your best and now you give yourself the peace they never could. And that is something they will never stop remembering. There's a silence that speaks louder than any scream, and that's the silence you left behind. You didn't have to slam the door. You didn't need to explain yourself one more time. You simply withdrew, quietly, calmly, powerfully. And in that moment, everything shifted because they thought they had time. They thought you would stay, argue, beg, fight for them, but instead you disappeared. And that absence, it shattered the illusion they were clinging to. They were never prepared for your stillness. See, they were used to noise, to chaos, to drama and manipulation. That's the environment they felt in control of. That's where they knew how to dominate. But what they never counted on was that silence could be so devastating, that your lack of reaction would echo louder than all the words they ever tried to use to confuse or control you. Because when someone like you, who once gave everything, suddenly gives nothing, the contrast is unbearable. Your presence was a gift. They didn't treat it that way, but it was. Every time you showed up, every time you listened, every time you gave them the benefit of the doubt, it was grace. And now that you're gone, they realize just how heavy that absence feels. It follows them into every room. It haunts their quiet moments. It makes them uncomfortable, not because you're doing anything, but because you're doing nothing. And nothing has become the loudest truth they've ever faced. There's no confrontation, no final blow-up, no dramatic ending they can use to justify their story, just silence, just the stark realization that they lost something precious. And that loss becomes louder with time, because the longer you're gone, the more it sinks in, you're not coming back. And now every new connection they chase feels emptier, shallower, more desperate, because it lacks what you brought effortlessly. Peace, loyalty, depth. They told themselves they didn't need you, that they could replace you, that people like you were everywhere. But now they know the truth. Now they see how rare you were. Now they understand that emotional maturity, consistency, and real love don't come in abundance. They gambled on the idea that your presence wasn't special, and they lost. You walking away without chaos disrupted them more than any argument ever could, because it revealed their own inability to face themselves. It left them alone with their guilt, their confusion, their regret. They can't blame you. They can't spin it. They can't lie to themselves for long, because every time they remember how you quietly removed yourself, they're reminded that it was their behavior that drove you away, not your inability to handle the relationship, but their unwillingness to meet you where you stood. This is where true power lies. Not in revenge, not in anger, but in restraint, in choosing yourself so completely that your absence becomes a mirror. And what they see in that mirror is painful. They see the lies they told, the games they played, the moments they could have chosen better, but didn't. And now there's no going back. No explanation they can give themselves will erase the fact that you were there and then you weren't. And it was entirely their doing. They can try to fill the silence with noise, parties, people, new distractions, but the ache remains, because it's not just the absence of your voice, it's the absence of your energy, the way you used to listen, the way you gave without keeping score, the way you brought peace to their storm. That kind of energy isn't just missed, it's grieved. And the worst part for them, it's the understanding that you were willing to stay. You were willing to walk through their mess with them. You were willing to grow, to support, to build something real, but they pushed you, they tested your patience, they mistook your grace for permission, and when they crossed the line one too many times, you didn't shout, you didn't retaliate, you just left. That's what terrifies them now, because they don't know how to fix it. They don't know how to reverse what's been done. They see you thriving, growing, becoming even stronger without them, and it confirms their worst fear. You didn't need them. You chose them, and now you've chosen peace instead. That peace becomes your power. That silence becomes their prison. You didn't have to destroy them. They destroyed themselves, and you didn't need to prove your worth. They're being forced to recognize it in your absence. That's the justice of it. That's the beauty. You rise, and they sit in the wreckage they created. And the longer you stay gone, the louder that silence grows until it's all they hear. So keep walking, keep rising, keep being silent. Let your absence speak. Let it echo, let it haunt, because some lessons are only learned in the quiet. And they're learning now, every single day, just how loud your silence really is. They didn't recognize it while they had it. That's the truth that now poisons every thought they have. You were the rare one, not just rare in personality, but rare in spirit. There was something about you that couldn't be faked, couldn't be replicated, couldn't be duplicated no matter how hard they might try now. You were the once-in-a-lifetime kind of person, the type people don't get a second chance with, and they fumbled it. They didn't see your value because they were blind to anything that didn't feed their ego. They were searching for control, for convenience, for attention. But what you brought was substance, and that terrified them. You offered depth in a world they were only prepared to skate across the surface of. You spoke truth in an environment built on lies. You gave honesty in a relationship they thought could survive on manipulation. And in their immaturity, in their fear, in their arrogance, they pushed it all away. They thought they had options. They believed that someone like you would be easy to find again, that the way you listened, the way you forgave, the way you stood by them no matter how messy things got, that it was normal. But now they know. Now they see the void your absence has carved out in their life because no one brings what you brought. No one sees them like you saw them, and the difference is striking. They thought they could replace you with noise, with validation, with something shallow that would make them forget. But you don't forget a once-in-a-lifetime soul. You don't forget the person who stayed when it was hard, who believed in you when you didn't even believe in yourself. You don't forget someone who loved you without trying to fix you or own you, but simply stood beside you. That's the kind of presence that leaves a permanent imprint. Now they measure every interaction against the standard you unknowingly set. Every laugh they fake, every connection they chase, every moment of attention they crave, it all falls short because none of it fills the space you left behind. They weren't ready for someone real. They weren't mature enough to handle someone who didn't play games, and now they're suffering the consequences of their own short-sightedness. You were the rare one, not because you were perfect, but because you were willing to be real. You brought truth. You brought depth, you brought stability, and those are things they didn't even realize they needed until they lost them. Now they see what they lost. Now they're waking up to the reality that people like you don't just appear again. You weren't some seasonal moment. You were a defining chapter, and that chapter is closed. That's what eats away at them. Not just that you're gone, but that you're gone for good, that you've changed, that you've grown, that the door they once assumed would always be open has been closed and locked, and you're not waiting on the other side anymore. That realization is soul-crushing because it forces them to see the truth. They destroyed something they didn't fully understand, and now they have to live without it. They'll try to tell themselves stories that you were too intense, that you expected too much, that it just wasn't meant to be. But all those stories fall apart every time they feel your absence. Because deep down, they know you were the real deal, and they blew it. They fumbled something sacred, something honest, something irreplaceable. That's not just regret, that's a kind of grief. And the worst part? They see you now glowing, thriving, walking in purpose, not bitter, not broken, but evolved, and that haunts them because it means you didn't need them to become your best self. It means the version of you they tried to diminish was only a glimpse of the power you were capable of, and now that power is undeniable. Now they're the ones looking from the outside in, watching you become everything they didn't know how to support. That's the lesson they can't escape, that when life hands you a once-in-a-lifetime deal, you don't get to mistreat it and expect it to stay. You don't get to sabotage the very thing that could have changed your life and then play the victim when it walks away. They know now that people like you don't orbit twice, that what you brought to their life won't come again, not in that form, not with that soul, not with that level of authenticity. So let them sit with it. Let them remember. Let them learn. You don't need to prove your worth. Life is doing that for you now. And their silence, their regret, their bitterness, those are all just echoes of a truth they can never escape. They lost the one person who was never supposed to be a lesson, but became the biggest one of all. And here's what makes that reality even more crushing for them. Your worth wasn't loud. You weren't out there bragging, demanding attention, trying to prove anything. You simply were. You showed up with presence, with heart, with consistency. And because you didn't make noise about your value, they assumed it wasn't rare. But now they know quiet strength is the hardest to replace. Unconditional love is the most painful to lose. And someone who loved them without an agenda is not just rare, it's sacred. They're starting to realize that love isn't supposed to hurt like what they've chased since you. Love isn't supposed to feel like uncertainty, manipulation, and temporary highs. What you gave was peace, not performance. And peace becomes unforgettable once chaos returns. That's what they're living in now, an endless loop of shallow interactions, temporary connections, and fake smiles, because real doesn't come back to back. And you were as real as it gets. You didn't have to scream, "You'll miss me." Life is doing that for you. Every time they reach for someone and feel nothing. Every time they laugh and it feels forced. Every time they look back and remember a version of themselves they only became when you were around. That version, the one you brought out in them, is gone because you were the safe space. You were the mirror that showed them what they could be if they chose to grow. But instead they chose comfort, ego, games. And now they live with the realization that they didn't just lose you, they lost who they were becoming with you. There's a kind of pain that doesn't fade, not because of nostalgia, but because of clarity, and that clarity is brutal. It whispers, "You had it and you ruined it." That voice won't go away because it lives in every area of their life now. It's not just about losing a relationship. It's about knowing they failed themselves. They chose lesser versions of love, of loyalty, of life itself. And no matter how much time passes, they'll never forget the moment they realized you weren't coming back. It's in the silence of their soul now. It's in the late night thoughts and the early morning aches. They scroll through life looking for distractions, but you were never something they could scroll past. You were an anchor in their chaos, and they cut the line. Now they drift while you rise. So don't regret walking away. Don't question whether your absence is felt. It is deeply.